We used to be married and we seen a couples therapist before a divorce. And I would say it was, in all of my experiences of therapy, it was a bit of a disaster.
There aren't a lot of couples therapy that are really specifically taking into account the unique experiences of gay men or LGBTQ people. We consciously or unconsciously are seeking out relationships to help us heal our childhood wounds. We grow up and become adults, and oftentimes we have unfinished business from past experiences. Usually that person is wanting to bring their partner to couples therapy because they view them as the problem.
So, is it easy to stay impartial, or do you feel drawn to one side?
It can sometimes happen where a therapist is taking the side of one of the couples, and that's damaging. I'd be curious, did the couples therapist ever mention that one of you feels the therapist is on their side?
I think after 3 sessions,
We decided to get divorced. A kind of gay couple with different libidos have a long and healthy relationship.
Absolutely. A man releases testosterone every time he has sex, and only oxytocin once he's fallen in love.
What impact do you think casual sex has on gay men?
You can be in a room full of other people and still feel a deep sense of loneliness. For a lot of gay men is that they grow up with this kind of feeling that they don't belong, that they're not part of.
I genuinely believe that Grindr makes this a lot worse for gay men.
I would agree, Oliver. I appreciate you saying that. That might be controversial for some.
Do you believe in astrology and that
I do.
depending on signs of the individual, people can be compatible or not?
Right, I'm out of here. Both of you guys are nuts.
Hi, I'm Azamat.
And I'm Oliver, and we're the founders of Friend of Dorothy.
In today's episode, we're having Chris Tompkins, therapist for gay men and couples. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Hi, Chris. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
We're very excited.
So before we get into our questions, just to give you a bit of background, me and Azamat are like big on therapy, but we used to be married and we seen a couples therapist before a divorce. And I would say it was, in all of my experiences of therapy, it was a bit of a disaster. And also finding information on couples therapy was a disaster. I think both of us really struggled with knowing how couples therapy should work compared to normal. So I think that's quite a lot of what we want to chat with you about today.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think we were satisfied with the couples therapy. So the first question is how couples therapy is different and how to find a good therapist who is expert in couples.
Yeah. Thank you. It's such a great question, and I'm so glad and happy to be here to be able to talk about it. Most of the theoretical orientations, most of the types of couples therapy that we learn as therapists are through a heteronormative lens. So kind of the classic male-female relationship. In particular, for gay men, they're going to be unique experiences that contribute based on both of the parties' backgrounds. So I think that's really important to take into consideration is that couples therapy, there aren't a lot of couples therapy that are really specifically taking into account the unique experiences of gay men or LGBTQ people.
And
Yeah.
which methodology, if I could call it methodology, from your practice works best?
So every couple that comes to therapy is going to want to work on something specific to their relationship. And so maybe a specific model might not fit that.
Yep.
From my experience, I love a type of therapy. It's called Imago therapy. The premise of Imago is that we consciously or unconsciously are seeking out relationships to help us heal our childhood wounds. So whether that's a heterosexual couple or that's a gay couple, a lesbian couple, it's that as a person, we grew up and we have experiences from our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
That we grow up and become adults. And oftentimes we have unfinished business from past experiences. And so to kind of work through that to completion, we'll consciously or unconsciously seek out a relationship to help us do that. And so oftentimes, consciously, a couple is wanting to come to therapy. Unconsciously, they're not really fully aware of the dynamics that are contributing to the things that they're wanting to work on.
Can I ask, in your experience, when couples come to therapy, do you find that one wants to be there more than the other, and it's almost one is dragging their heels?
Mm. In my experience, there does tend to be someone who maybe initiates the conversation, or they're the ones who introduce we need to go to couples therapy. And so maybe they're the ones who send an email. And in my experience, usually that person is wanting to bring their partner to couples therapy because they view them as the problem. And so again, kind of going back to Imago therapy, what I love so much about it is that there are three aspects in the relationship from an Imago therapy's perspective. There's, let's say, you, Oliver, and then you, Azamat, and then the relationship is a third entity. And so oftentimes people think of the people, but they're not really thinking of the relationship as its own entity. And so what is each of you doing to tend to the garden of the relationship?
And with obviously what you've said about therapy in general, most of it is centered towards straight couples. So I guess my question is, you've got two men who might be, for example, extremely masculine and a bit more not in touch with their feelings. Do they struggle more with it because they're gay men, do you think?
No, not at all. I think at the end of the day, so both of the things can be true. So where it's important for a couples therapist to have experience or knowledge of same-sex dynamics and just experiences as a gay man coming into yourself, your erotic template, things about the sexual dynamics of the relationship are really important. That's what could be so helpful of someone who has that knowledge or background and not looking at things through a kind of classic heteronormative lens. At the end of the day, though, relationships are relationships. And so whether it's a heterosexual couple or a gay couple, oftentimes in my experience, kind of again going back to the Imago perspective, is that we all have defense mechanisms. And typically what happens in relationship dynamics is where one partner is what's considered hyperarousal and one partner is considered hypoarousal. And that kind of just goes to the unconscious dynamics that attracts the two. But hyperarousal is someone who kind of, when they get upset, their emotions, they get really big. They're hyperarousal. And then that triggers the other partner to go into hypoarousal. So they're the one who typically shuts down. And so oftentimes that creates a dynamic where they feel like they're not communicating, they're frustrated. The hyperarousal partner wants to talk and address the issue, and then the hypoarousal partner wants to retreat. And so the more they retreat, the more the hyperarousal feels rejected or abandoned. And that just kind of continues the dynamic.
And how do you break that dynamic, Chris?
It starts by bringing that into the awareness of understanding. Because I use an Imago kind of reference, I'm wanting to know about your background, or I'm wanting to know about your experience, both of the people together in the room. And
Yeah.
what's so beautiful about couples therapy is, of course, the couple, they know each other. Like they met, they dated, they got together. They maybe never ever sat down and, as a witness, listened to their partner describe experiences as the therapist is asking them questions, and just listen to them
Mm-hmm.
and listen to them share about their childhood or their background. And, I often say to my own clients is, we want to not stay in the past. It's more about understanding the past so that we can understand the present. We can make sense of the present.
Yeah.
I very much felt that when me and Azmat were in couples therapy, the therapist was on my side. And that could just be me. Like, so sometimes you feel, especially when you see it on Instagram, etc., that the therapist has maybe picked a side. And I guess that's also probably a fear of people going into therapy that, oh, the therapist is going to be on your side or not mine, etc. So is it easy to stay impartial, or do you feel drawn to one side when you're doing
Yeah.
therapy?
Yeah. So it's so important for therapists themselves to either be in their own therapy or to have consultation groups, people, other therapists that they can talk to. In couples therapy, it's not uncommon because I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a human.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I'm human first and foremost. And so I'm gonna have my own emotional responses. And so if I'm not aware of those, then it can sometimes happen where a therapist is taking the side of one of the couples. And that's damaging for the couples. That's not good for the couples therapy because that's probably reinforcing a wound that the other partner has experienced in the past. And so for the therapists themselves to really be able to talk about that in their own consultation group. If any of you have ever watched couples therapy, it's a show that
Yep.
it's really, yeah.
Yep.
So Orna goes to her own consultation group.
Yep.
And that's so important because you get to talk about, like, I'm kind of siding with Oliver. Like I'm really on Oliver's side. And then you get to talk about that. And if the therapist can work through that, then that's fine. If the therapist doesn't think that they can not side with Oliver, then that's where you would want to refer the couple to another therapist
Mm.
Interesting.
so that you could be impartial.
I really relate to so many things that you are talking about, Chris. Even starting from how we found our gay couple therapist, it just was very difficult. And then during our first sessions, I felt all over that he was taking my side more. And I think what was very kind of interesting when we already got divorced with Oliver and I was watching couples therapy with Orna as a show, I loved it so much just because you relate and you could see how everyone sees their own story. And you think that your partner sees it the same way that you do. And
Right.
and it's completely different. And that's shocking, like 180 degrees different. Um, so I guess, Chris, my question to you would be how to find a good gay couple therapist and what are green flags, what are the red flags?
I always say, and I think this is important, is that therapy is a relationship. And so it's so important for you, and whether it's individual therapy or it's a couples therapy, is where you feel comfortable. And so green flag is where you do a consultation, you Google or you search and you find, maybe going into it doing the couple, that could be even an exercise that the couple does, is like, what kind of couples therapy are we interested in? Is there a specific approach that we want? Orna, she's psychodynamics. And then how each of you feels in the consultation with the therapist. I often will even joke sometimes, it's kind of like speed dating, when you do a consultation with the therapist, is hopefully you're meeting with a few different ones and you're talking to them, and then you're checking in with each other of like how you feel. So that's how to look for red flags or green flags, is how you feel.
Hmm.
Because in that relationship, if you feel comfortable, because hopefully the couples therapist is aware of the fact that both of you kind of mentioned that maybe one of you was on the defensive. So the couples therapist is hopefully aware of the fact that we all have defense mechanisms. Our defense mechanisms are like skin. We don't want to just rip off our skin. And so the couples therapist is aware that maybe this is probably something that has happened historically for each of you. And that's kind of the childhood wounds part, is that the therapist is aware of, based on your background, what they know through your intake, the questions that you completed, probably, hopefully you completed some questions for them. And so they're starting to conceptualize, they're starting to think about, okay, Oliver comes from this background, Asmat comes from this background, possibly what are contributing factors. to be aware of the defense mechanisms that might show up early on in couples therapy. So the therapist's job is to be attuned to those and to develop trust with both parties, both of you. I'd be curious, did the couples therapist ever name or mention that one of you feels the therapist is on their side?
I think after 3 sessions,
We decided
he
to get
dis-
divorced.
he decided he offered a one-to-one consultation with Oliver, I think. And then we had one more session together, and then we just decided that it doesn't work for us. Let's get divorced. And we emailed him, okay, doesn't work. Thank you very much. So I think overall experience was rough.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know whether at some point, as you said, Chris, we could have chosen maybe a different path in terms of like different therapists.
Yeah.
But I guess it was a time where there was no chat GPT to ask what kind of therapists there are, how to find a couple therapist, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, and I say this in my consultations with couples, is that sometimes couples therapy is consciously uncoupling.
hmm
Sometimes people come to couples therapy and it's kind of the last effort, the last ditch effort that they're trying. And so coming to couples therapy can sometimes be recognizing that this relationship isn't going to work. And so it's important to name that early on so that there's sort of managing of expectations. And typically how I work and a lot of my colleagues work is that I'll meet with the couple first. So our first session will be together. So after we have the consultation, I'll meet with the couple and then I'll do what's called a resource session, meaning that I'll meet with each of the partners separately to sort of hear, because sometimes, we're on our in the beginning stages of couples therapy, we're on our best, typically we're on our kind of best behavior. And so maybe we're not fully saying the things that we want to say. And so when I do a resource session with a couple, I have what's called a no secrets policy. So I do say like there are no secrets. So everything that you do share, is I'm not going to keep that a secret. The idea though is that when I meet with each of you separately, I'm kind of hearing from your own perspective. And then the third session will come together. We'll come back together.
Yeah. Chris, I think that's a very interesting point in terms of, I assume many couples come when there are big issues already.
Yes.
And maybe
Yeah.
we do need a third person's opinion to give us like, is it black or white? Like, can we save it or like we're done here, right? But my question is, when is usually actually a better time to come to a couple therapist?
I don't think there's necessarily a right time because I've worked with couples in the past where, couples therapy can also be preventative. I think there's a lot of stigma. I mean, I grew up in the United States and I'm from Arizona, and my family, there's a lot of stigma about therapy. They think that if you need therapy, you're messed up. And even as a therapist in my family, they sort of view that you have to have problems or have a mental illness to go to therapy. And that's not always the case. Therapy can be a really supportive, explorative, especially if it's going back to the theoretical orientations, depending on what that therapist practices. It could be a really great way to empower and self-discovery. Um, and so I think there is some stigma. And so couples therapy, translating that stigma, is that sometimes, often couples think of, okay, we need couples therapy because we're going through a really difficult patch or we're going to break up. Whereas couples therapy can be preventative. It could be something that we want to deepen our intimacy. We want to deepen our connection. I've worked with couples kind of on both extremes, where they're about to break up and they want this last ditch effort to, couples therapy to save them. Or I've worked with, couples who things are going really well. They want to keep that going. And so we do a lot of work around like relationship vision. What's your vision of the relationship? How can you deepen the intimacy? It's not uncommon for two men to have different libidos. And so, how can we explore sexuality in like, kind of like a safe, contained way and to learn about each other's erotic template? Because we all have them.
That brings me to my next question, which is what's the main reasons you see couples coming to therapy, gay couples?
I think the classic, most common thing is communication.
Hmm.
Is, we need better communication. And so that's kind of the surface. When I hear that, I'm like, okay, that's like the top layer. And underneath that is there's unmet emotional needs that are happening that through the exploration of going back to kind of the defense mechanisms, the different arousal, hyperarousal, hypoarousal, um, exploring more of the childhood wounds and how that's possibly probably being reenacted in the relationship.
Hmm.
And so the most common to answer your question is around communication.
And I guess sometimes that you might think the problem is here or it's in one place, but actually it's in communication. And I find in life, most problems that happen are generally about communication or lack of it more than anything.
Yeah, though communication, that's kind of like the shiny sparkly thing that sort of takes our attention. And so we think it's communication when in fact it's so much, it's like the iceberg. And then underneath that is all of the unmet emotional needs, the defensive, the attachment styles, the hypo arousal structure that's happening, the way that each of us regulates. And that's all impacting communication. So communication is kind of it's easy to put that label on it, and it's so much more underneath.
And you just mentioned attachment styles. What would you say is the most common attachment style for gay men?
Well, there's just for your listeners, maybe is there's secure attachment and then there's insecure attachment. And insecure attachment, there are different types of insecure attachment. There's avoidant, anxious avoidant, disorganized. You could be a combination of one of those. And so it really depends on being gay certainly is a factor that's important to consider. Also, culture, um, demographics are really important, whether or not the family was supportive. Religion like anti-LGBT religious background? All of those factors can play into someone's attachment style. And so they can either be anxious or they could be avoidant. I have if I were to do like a scan of the clients that I'm working with, I would say majority is, I would say anxious or avoidant, and then disorganized is that's kind of lower on the what I tend to see.
And what does disorganized attachment style look like?
Disorganized attachment, it's kind of like the name disorganized. It's where there's difficulty trusting. There's often a pattern if they don't feel like they belong anywhere. And so it's difficult for them to formulate secure relationships.
Hmm.
So whether it's group therapy, whether it's friendships, whether it's therapy, whether it's a relationship, difficulty to trust people, to trust others. That's kind of the classic, would be the classic just for disorganized. And that comes from somewhere. It's not like something's wrong with them. And that's what I try to help convey is that none of these things are because something's wrong with a person. It's because we come from experiences that have informed our nervous system and how we relate to others and ourselves.
Okay. You mentioned libido, Chris. Can a gay couple with different libidos have a long and healthy relationship, or it's going to be a big problem down the line?
Absolutely. A couple with different libidos can have a long and healthy, lasting relationship. I think what makes it where it couldn't be is if it's not addressed or if it's not talked about, if it's not something that you're able to work with and you're working against.
Could you give us maybe some examples from your practice, from your experience, when a couple had issues like that, and how
Yeah,
it was solved?
where a couple there's different libidos. And certainly also there are different defensive patterns that are happening. And so again, going back to the hypo arousal, that's really, really important. And so if that's not understood for the couple, then they might want to open the relationship.
Hmm.
And so then they think that opening the relationship is going to help them address the sort of lack of intimacy, lack of sex. Um, Whereas sometimes that could be certainly, helpful and supportive. If it's trying to replace something that's missing, then that can just exacerbate the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so in couples therapy, hopefully what we'll do is we'll be able to explore what the unmet need is. We'll be able to learn about each other's erotic templates.
Mm-hmm.
As humans, we all have an erotic template. And so we're learning about desire, we're learning about sex, sexuality, our bodies. For a lot of gay men, we grew up with our desire is inherently bad or wrong. And so that can sometimes play out in the dynamics of the relationship. And so, to what degree, if a couple comes to couples therapy and they've never been in individual therapy, then I'll definitely recommend for them to have individual therapy concurrently while we're doing couples therapy, because things are brought up in couples therapy, hopefully. Because, like, when you clean your room or clean your house, dust comes up, and that's part of the process of cleaning. And so you want to be able to maybe take that somewhere in individual therapy, for especially for gay men, because I think in my experience with gay men, being able to explore shame, the impact of shame on our desire, projection, where maybe our attitudes about sex, our beliefs about sex, where do we learn about sex? How is that playing out? There's so much more to sex and intimacy than penetrative sex. And so being able to explore our bodies, intimacy, emotional connection. Something I'll share here that's really, really fascinating to me. So there's a woman, her name's Dr. Tara Stewart, I think, but she's a neuroscientist. She studies the brain, and she shared that women, every time a woman has sex, she releases oxytocin. Her body chemically releases oxytocin. And so it's really easy for a woman, if a woman continues to have sex with the same person, she's bound to fall in love because oxytocin is released every time a woman has sex.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a man releases testosterone every time he has sex.
Mm-hmm.
And only oxytocin once he's fallen in love. So I think that's fascinating. If we look at two men, they're releasing testosterone every time they have sex. And so what are we doing to the emotional connection that we have? Because two men could have sex and not release oxytocin. And so what are we doing to the emotional bonding? That kind of goes back to Imago. They're the partners. Then there's the relationship. So what are each of us doing to contribute to tend to the garden of the emotionality of the relationship?
Chris, I want to ask you a few questions about compatibility. And this question will be quite ridiculous. Do you believe in astrology, and that
I do.
depending on signs of the individual, people can be compatible or not?
Right, I'm out of here. Both of you guys are nuts. I'm done. I'm off to the bar.
I do believe that. I mean, I like astrology. I certainly enjoy. I think it's a tool. I think,
Okay.
like anything, it could be a tool. I don't think that because like your astrological sign says that you're not compatible with a particular sign, that's like a hard and fast rule.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like a love language. You're familiar with love languages?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just aware of kind of how that maybe will play out in the relationships I have. It's like, oh, Taurus, I'm stubborn, those kinds of things.
I'm coming from ex-Soviet Union countries, so where astrology was quite big. And for example, Oliver is
A realist.
realist, and he doesn't believe in it. So it's just always interesting to hear out whether there is something behind it or not. I'm asking you because I think astrology was one thing, but now numerology is quite interesting as well. For example, I'm start dating someone and I ask ChatGPT to give me numerological diagnostics of that person. And if I see that matches actually the person, then I think it's like a good tool how to approach this person, because you know what this type of person is like. So I find this tool to be useful, but some people just laugh at me. So I was wondering, what's your professional opinion on astrology or numerology?
Yeah, I think my thing is like anything that you can use as a tool. I think where it could be problematic or is where we start to have biases, where, confirmation bias, if that's something you've heard of, where if I learn about the person, their sign, then I will unconsciously maybe start to kind of see them in that way.
Yeah,
And so then I'm almost like setting myself up to
failure.
interpret interpret certain behaviors or things that they do through that, oh, they're a Sagittarius. Um, Whereas if I can use it like a love language, like it's a tool to help me
Yeah,
to connect with that person and to learn more about them, but not as like a hard and fast
yeah.
thing that I'm sort of already without even knowing them or knowing their background.
It's just sometimes when you maybe at initial stages of dating or like the first time you meet person and you ask about ChatGPT, for example, for compatibility and says it's very low, you're so different, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it can ruin the whole, potential of that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. Not to sound simplistic, but opposites really do attract. And in my experience, kind of going back to the relationship dynamics, that's what I love so much about Imago is that relationships are like a puzzle piece. And so we're drawn to people because on some level, we're unconsciously working through something. And so oftentimes in relationships, and I'll say this to clients all the time, even if I'm working with an individual and they're bringing their relationship challenges, to therapy, is even if they broke up with that person,
Hmm.
they're going to get into a relationship with the same kind of person with a different face.
Yeah.
Because we repeat our patterns because we're unfinished business working through those past kind of childhood wounds. We're wounded in relationships and we heal through our relationships.
Hmm.
So another kind of example of Imago is that the fundamental purpose of a relationship is growth. So we're drawn into relationship with others ultimately to grow.
So I had some questions that I wanted to ask you, but more of it from a single perspective rather than a couple's.
Mm.
What impact do you think casual sex has on gay men?
Yeah, I think anything can have impact on us, whether it's food or alcohol. It's kind of how what the need is, how we're using it. And so if the casual sex is because we're trying to fulfill an unmet need and there's like this emotional hole that we're trying to fill and so we continue to have casual sex, then that's something. Whereas if it's, I feel really confident and secure in myself, and I want to express myself through my sexuality, then that's kind of an embodied, intentional thing. It really depends on the impact that it has on your life.
And do you think more often than not, it does cause negative consequences?
Casual sex,
Yeah.
it can. Yeah, it can. I don't know if there's a again hard and fast rule of all casual sex creates negative consequences. It's depending on what our intent, what's behind it, what's
Yeah.
behind the purpose for us doing it.
Makes sense.
Chris, I have a question about AI. I use AI a lot for including therapy,
Mm,
for personal therapy. I've seen the stats that most people use ChatGPT. Like the topic number one is therapy.
hmm,
How do you see it evolving? And do you believe that it's going to help also in couples therapy?
hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question. Very timely. I'll have clients that will bring something in that they told me that they put in a chat GPT that told them something, and so then we'll process that or talk about it. My thing is about utilizing whatever it is as a tool. So I often will say to clients, most of therapy is what happens in between sessions. And so if it's something that a couple is usually utilizing to ask questions that's supportive of the work that they're doing, then that could be useful. I do think that there's something that AI doesn't provide, which is that relational human experience that is created with a person in therapy. And there are nuances that maybe AI won't be able to pick up or address specifically. And I think that kind of going back to the we're wounded in relationship. And so hopefully what therapy can offer is a reparative experience, because it's in that repair that we can have different experiences with people in our lives.
Makes sense. One of the biggest topics that we observe from the gay community is loneliness
Mm,
and finding the relationships. Um, would you agree that that's very common?
yes.
And what advice would you give to our community?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's a really powerful question. And it's definitely something. I live in Los Angeles, and it's something that I see here as well. I do think that one of the things to be considered as a gay man is that loneliness isn't about being not with other people. So you can be in a room full of other people and still feel a deep sense of loneliness. And that comes from, oftentimes in my experience as a gay man, we grow up learning, we start to discover something about ourselves internally, and we hold that, we keep that in. We don't really know what it is, and so we're kind of childhood development, we're developing naturally as all children do, and we're starting to notice differences, and all of these things are kept inside, and there are truths that we're not able to say. There are things that we're not able to speak out loud. Over time, that is absorbed in our bodies and our nervous system. So there's this deep sense of being, it's almost like if there's a glass screen between us where we're with each other, but we can't fully touch one another. And that can be like a felt experience for a lot of gay men, is that they grow up with this kind of feeling that they don't belong, that they're not part of. And that's just reinforced over time. And so then we grow up and we're these adults, and we have this feeling of loneliness because there's been so much that we haven't been able to articulate or share or express. And so part of healing loneliness, to answer your question, is to be able to express ourselves, express those unnamed, unspoken things that we carry, that we've carried for so long that we don't even know it. I wrote my first book, Raising LGBTQ Allies, because it's about experiences that children have with not having parents who are attuned to them. And what attunement is being able to anticipate a child's needs. And so for gay men, we've learned that our needs won't be met. That's kind of an unconscious belief that we have. So I threw at you a lot of information, but I think that for gay men, absolutely, there is an epidemic of loneliness. The answer to loneliness is everything that I just shared here, is to be able to offer a reparative experience for ourselves.
So I don't like to point fingers, but I have a very strong opinion, and I partly believe something that makes this a lot worse is Grindr. Not all dating apps, but I genuinely believe that Grindr makes this a lot worse for gay men, just in the
Mm.
way that is it makes gay men act towards each other. What would your opinion be on that?
I would agree, Oliver. I appreciate you saying that. That might be controversial for some, but I think that the thing about Grindr is kind of like social media. Like if you're familiar, like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then Twitter, or now X, is that people behave differently on each of those platforms. And I feel like Twitter or X is kind of, people, they just say the stuff that they wouldn't say necessarily on Facebook or Instagram. And I think that Grindr is similar. Is there's a lot of unhealed people out there, and there's a lot of toxic shame. And so Grindr is kind of this place where there's a lot of that toxicity, and it's being projected. And my wounds, because I'm wounded, no one wakes up in the morning and is like, who's a truly authentic, grounded in themselves, happy person that is going to want to make someone else feel pain.
Mhm.
That comes from their own pain.
Mm,
And so Grindr, in my experience and hearing this from my clients all the time, is it's a place where people can be really mean.
mhm.
And that's not an absolute truth. I mean, there are people, I do know couples who have met on Grindr, but I do think that similar to the social medias, like X is this place where people just share like racist, like just awful things because they can. Grindr is kind of a similar place where people can just like let their stuff out and take that out on others.
And also, I think with Grindr, there's an unintentional meanness that happens all the time. You know, it can be just ignoring people. Like if somebody said hello to you in any sort of other environment, you wouldn't just ignore them or start a conversation and then just walk away.
Yeah.
And if they came up to you and said hello again, just ignore them.
Right.
So, and I think quite often it's unintentional. It's just this environment has been created that gay men are almost addicted to.
This is a really big topic for sure. And with clients that I work with, myself as a gay man, it's kind of like, what are you feeling when you go to pick up Grindr? And we get to slow down and notice within ourselves, like maybe there was something that happened that made me feel sad or upset or disconnected. And so I just kind of automatically pick up the Grindr and then go, and I may be seeking validation or I may be seeking a repair from that experience I just had. But then to your point, it's not a place for that because people are just literally kind of swiping because they want to hook up. And so they're not really there to like actually engage in conversation. And so that person who has that wound is just being reinforced over and over.
Yeah.
I think Grindr is a very big topic for another episode. Conscious of the time. So Chris, thank you so much. This was very, very helpful. I think we've learned a lot about couple therapy. It's a very difficult topic. And I think gay couples should address the issues early on and choose the right expert to help them with that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful to be here and to be able to have this conversation. I'll just quickly add too, I think there's something to be said about what you just shared, is that so many of us as gay men, we weren't modeled healthy, secure relationships in our lives that we were able to kind of, I mean, there's certainly celebrities out there that maybe we could point to, but a felt sense of healthy gay male relationships. And so hopefully that's something that couples therapy can provide.
Thank you.
Amazing.